What's happening, good people? You're now locked in with the baddest chaplain on the globe, hoping all is well with you and yours. I am joined today by a tremendously special guest, my dear sister, Valerie Rawls from the Eco-Womanist Institute Southeast. Valerie, how are you doing today?
Folks say blessed beyond measure. I am just that, my dear brother. How are you
Yeah.
today?
Oh, no, it's feeling the same, through every mountain, but we're still here, you know?
Absolutely. Still we rise. I'm
I'm
with the
telling you.
92%.
Come on, I know that's right. I know that's right. I hope you're getting your rest.
I'm working at it. That's a newfound phenomenon for us, right?
It truly
Like,
is.
how do we do this?
Right. Right, like, what I do on vacation, I don't know, like, I couldn't figure it
I
out.
had a FedEx package delivered.
Exactly, exactly.
That's the truth.
That's really real. That is really real. So talk to me a bit about your whole journey, you know, thinking about as Black folks think about the work that we have to do. I would argue not enough of us think about environmental activism. That, it doesn't seem to be the thing that grabs folks' attention initially, but environmental racism causes all kinds of problems from, various cancers that are only found because our communities are redlined to next to the landfill, the quality of water, the asthma rates and respiratory issues, all sorts of issues like that. But I'd love to hear what brought you into the work of environmental activism and what led you to found the Eco-Womanist Institute Southeast?
Well, I'm going to start by saying we might not use the language of the colonizer regarding environmental justice, but we have been the repurpose, reuse environmentalists from the day we got here
On.
in chains.
Yeah.
So I have to constantly remind people that, environmental justice and justice, period, we fought for. And environmental justice isn't bunnies and bees. It's about Black people.
Hello.
It's about housing. It's about access to healthcare. It's about public safety. It's about education. So environmental justice for me is the totality of how we live and what systems we have to govern ourselves through that fall under the racist white supremacy and colonizers methodologies. So how did I get here with that being my intro into we have been environmentalists and fighting for environmental justice for a very long time. Well, first, before I get started, I'm in Atlanta, Georgia, and I have to give my shout out to my Muskogee folks and my, come on, Cherokee Nation folks
Let's
who
go.
I sit in this land in Georgia
Yes.
that they were brutally walked away from with a trail of tears. So I can't get started without saying that.
I respect that for sure. For sure.
Thank you. How did I get here? So I am the child of the children of the Great Migration.
Mm-hmm.
My grandfather was a Mississippi sharecropper,
True.
and my great grandfather was born in 1891 in Bolton, Mississippi.
On.
And I just spent some time in Mississippi with the Black Food Justice Alliance, but we can talk about that later.
For sure.
I got here because, as I said, I am the child of the children of the Great Migration. So both of my parents, my mother at 5, my father was 16, and his circumstances for leaving Mississippi were a little bit different than my mother's. They migrated to the north, and what people don't realize, geography wise, I might have been raised in quote unquote the north, but I am still the daughter of the children who were
Hmm.
raised and born in the south.
Right.
And so my father, who's a wonderful outdoorsman, he loved being outside. And so he told us early on, my 2 younger sisters and I, that you are the ecosystem. You're not separate from it. So I was taught very early on that the stewardship, it's a responsibility because we are the ecosystem. And so that's how I got started. And my first environmental justice cleanup, actually, I was walking home from school, I think it was about in 6th grade, and I actually took a route that I wasn't supposed to. Let me just preference that. And there was this big field that I was walking through, full of tires, the usual debris that
For
people just
sure.
choose to just leave behind. And so I went home and my little irate 6th grade mind and said, somebody needs to do something about that. That's really blah, 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 blah.
Come on.
Father said, why don't you clean it up?
Right.
So I gathered up my friends in the neighborhood. We cleaned it up,
Let's go.
got it all ready to play in it, and somebody got put on punishment and couldn't play.
Oh,
Remember, I walked home from school in a route that I wasn't supposed to.
how you know there was a mess over there, you know?
Exactly. So my father, so everybody was excited. The parents got involved. They helped us with the
Yeah.
heavy we couldn't carry. My dad brought his truck over and cleaned up with us. And everybody's around, let's go play. And he said, where you going? And I'm like, to go
And go celebrate.
time out. You on punishment. You weren't supposed to even go in that direction. But it ended
That is
up being a
amazing.
blessing for everybody. So that was my first environmental cleanup project, if you
That's
will.
so great. That's so great. That makes me think of like this is I've heard another interview ask people like what radicalized you and you seen that mess and an organizer from the very beginning. That's beautiful.
And organizing I could do. I was blessed that my colleagues and friends growing up, when I went out to play independently of my parents,
Right.
there were no girls in my age group. They were all boys.
Yeah.
And so I had a chance to, really get down to the dirt, literally, and
Come
play
on.
with boys that were experimenting, adventurous, and so was I. And some days when they were doing what they do, I would climb up in a tree and sit there and draw or just,
Come on.
yeah, just chill and go like, hey, that I'm not going to do, but I'm going to go climb up in this tree and just watch you.
Got my own space up here near the
Exactly.
clouds.
My own treehouse, literally.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's awesome. That's awesome. So when you think about those experiences as a child and being encouraged, although, the lesson was still taught with you not being able to play initially, think about like the ways in which that sort of latitude to organize, like what most kids would see that and just walk past it. Most kids would see that, and even if they cleaned it a little bit, they wouldn't have the sort of gumption to say, let me get all my friends to come do this and organize in that way. Like, what was it about what you were told about yourself, which how you felt about yourself that made you such a leader at such a young age?
Well, I had great examples. My father was heavily involved in civil disobedience, civic engagement, making sure that the community had what they needed. And my mom, too. We had under our kitchen sink a Tupperware container with a place setting for one person. And it was quote unquote the town drunk. Depending on his level of sobriety, he could
Right.
come and sit at the table or he would have to get cleaned up and sit on the stoop in the back. But
For sure.
I saw it real time in my household that my parents believed in community and economic development and
No doubt.
participatory democracy. So when you grow up in a household where the town drunk and the mayor could be trying to knock on the front door at the same time,
Come on.
and the church. Let's just be clear. I grew up in Canaan Baptist Church, and I saw all of those amazing men and women who, during the course of the week, had limitations and barriers placed on them. But on Sunday and during the week, of course, depending on what auxiliaries they were participating in,
Right, right.
they knew what liberation looked like. And so I was pretty much raised in a position of the God that you serve is a liberator, and you are more than a conqueror through Christ Jesus. And all things are possible to him that believes. So when you got that as your ingrained, this is how you do it,
Right.
that's how I got here, just based on the fact that I lived in not only my home, but my community. It was communal. You
Yeah.
don't heal in isolation, and we healed as a
There it
community
is.
together. And I got to give Sister Bell Hooks shout out for that because I
For
can't
sure.
take credit for that quote.
I hear you. But anytime we get to raise the name of the good sister Bell Hooks, I'm here for it.
Okay, all day,
Absolutely
every
here for it. All day, every day, for real, for real. I'm amazed by how, you said something at the beginning of our conversation, Valerie, about how so many people think about environmentalism as, the bunnies and the bees and not about black people, not about human beings. And I'm even further amazed about how congregations of faith, in my estimation, don't take environmentalism seriously enough. So how have you centered faith and environmentalism and social justice, three spaces that can have a very peculiar relationship with each other, but at the same time, there's absolutely a through line through all three of those. How do you and your work with eco-womanism like sort of put that through line through and have this approach to integrating faith, ecology, and social justice?
Well, I think the 3 E's that we've always grounded the work in, which is eco-spirituality, environmental justice, and ethics.
There it
And
is.
so when you look at the eco-spirituality lens or look through it through the lens of how do you incorporate the things that you say or integrate them,
Yeah.
eco-spirituality is about your earth honoring faith, right? How do you bring your faith to dominion versus domination?
Come on.
Right? How do you bring your faith to the earth is the Lord and the fullness thereof,
That's it.
right?
That's it.
How do you bring your earth honoring faith to the meek shall inherit the earth?
Yeah.
So there are scriptures that ground us, but we have to choose to bring that to the earth, which is sacred.
Absolutely.
And so through the environmental justice lens, we get to talk about the disparities that when we sit in a church on Sunday morning, the vast majority of us, the people of color, we have to go back to the communities that are suffering from, as we said before, the lack of affordable housing,
Right.
lack of public safety,
Right.
poor healthcare systems, lack of food access. So that's that environmental justice piece for me. So you can have conversations with people about affordable housing. They get that.
No doubt.
Conversations about lack of healthcare. They get that. And so when you start to bring the umbrella of these are environmental injustices that you're suffering from,
Huh?
it frames that conversation differently, but it's still under the environmental justice umbrella.
For
And
sure.
last but not least, ethics. How do we make moral, ethical decisions
Come
on the
on.
behalf of others that might not be sitting at the table or didn't get a chair or an invitation?
Right.
Have these discussions. And so that's where the public discourse around ethical decision making for those who are suffering the most from the environmental justice issues. So for me, it isn't hard to have these conversations because in addition to the work that I do with Eco-Womanist Institute, I mean, for 40 years, I've been the chief cook and bottle washer of a marketing firm.
Come on.
And so in that, I've had the pleasure, the honor, and sometimes like, "Ooh, Lord, how did I get here?" To sit with the public, private, philanthropic, faith-based, and citizen sector.
Uh-huh.
And each one of those stakeholders has a different cultural code or cultural humanity,
Right.
and you have to be able to know how to dissect them, decode them, and then bring them back together at the right time. Because sometimes philanthropy and the private sector, they don't want to sit together, but they
Come on.
should.
Right.
Sometimes, and the faith-based sector, which is always this appendage that seems to sit out on the outside,
Right.
like where we came from, that was the hub.
Center. Right.
Right, so it's backwards. It's like
Yeah.
I read a Harvard study about the asset of the church. I'm like, the church was the asset. That was the hub and all the
Right.
folks that fed in and out of it for us. And
Absolutely.
then that outer circle was Jesus holding it all together
That's right.
and
That's right.
rolling in a direction that's going to be fruitful for all of us.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's for me. It's been a blessing that because of my professional career,
Yes.
and well, let's take a step back because of my being rooted and grounded in a faith tradition.
No doubt.
And when I moved into my professional career, it didn't leave me. It came right along with me. I mean,
Right.
that's the audacity of being authentic is
There it
to
is.
ensure that you bring all of the pieces of you. I can't leave Marshall and Shirley and my grandparents behind if I'm going to let the ancestors lead me forward.
There it is. There it is. Absolutely. No, I love that because you bring up such a wonderful point in that it feels like when we go from our sort of core culture within the Black experience to the greater world, that it does feel very much inverted and something that was so central and so binding and kept the cohesion going now becomes this sort of like nice to have if it's even that, which is just not what we're used to at all.
Well, that's why the kingdom is upside down. I mean,
Hello.
you can't let the world system tell you what and who you are.
Right.
And when you know whom's you are,
Hello.
and you're rooted and grounded in reality, because I'm going to say this into my listeners with my dear brother, When we were colored, there was a benefit because we relied on one another.
Right, right, right,
Okay? And we learned from one another. Not only
right,
relied, but we learned and then we executed together.
right.
And I think those are the things that are fragmented or have stratified us as a people,
Yes,
is because we're not in that learning, communing, and executing together.
absolutely, absolutely. And it's something about, I'll never forget having a conversation with my wife's grandfather, who's now deceased, but he was a principal before segregation, and then after could was only a teacher and could never become a principal again. So when he first spoke to me and was like, "Yeah, integration wasn't that great," I was just like mind blown. I was like, "What do you mean? This was like one of the biggest victories we had. We can't go back." And just seeing he laid down exactly what you just said for me, like the way in which Black people relied on each other and had systems. Now it's very easy for a lot of like Monday morning quarterbacks to just pretend to be economists and be like, Black folks don't try to start no business. This is why we can't succeed. We need to be like these other groups. And I was like, we were doing that and historically have continued to do that. It's when we try to scale it up to something that's completely self-sustainable that it's always been met with outside violence, like every single time.
Every time. And we have the history to prove it, which they're trying to erase.
Right, in real time.
Right, exactly. And when you let people understand, we have not been the ones who have been on subsidies, from land
Come on.
to housing
Right.
to GI Bills.
Hello.
I can keep going,
Yeah.
to JVs, VCs, and any other institution that
Yeah.
was rooted around economic prosperity
Right.
for the community. All those safety nets, if you want to call them that, or institutions, were not favorable to our success for scaling. I just got something interesting the other day. People always reach out to you on LinkedIn and whatever. And so
Right.
this particular person reached out, and I do my due diligence before I accept, and was affiliated with this women's organization for women leaders.
Uh-huh.
And so they had different categories. So you had memberships for business owners, you had memberships for the C-suite sisters in corporate. Of course, as an entrepreneur, I'm going to look and see, well, what is the fee for the business owners?
Right.
Minimum. Are you ready for this?
So let me stay seated.
Right. Minimum revenue, annual revenue was 20 million.
Minimum.
Minimum. Minimum. And
Wow.
I'm not gonna name any names, but the daughter
Nah.
of a particular individual, she was one of the chairs of the organization, one of the
Yeah.
committees, and she sat there and she talked about how great this organization was, and of course, I'm looking to see how many Black women are at
For
20
sure.
billion in revenue, right?
For sure.
But again, going back to what you said about scale, there is a scale that is exclusive.
Right.
Right, so,
Right.
how do we quantify scale?
Yes.
The weight
Yeah.
of it
Or
from not entering,
come on.
and the goal to do it, I mean, you're sitting here talking to a sister right now, so the Eco-Womanism Institute is 6 years old, and over the course of the last 6 years, particularly the Southeast component, we've been
Yes.
place-based, so the Midwest, Southeast. And the issues that I've been tackling for the last 6 years have to do with participatory democracy, ensuring that people get a chance to cast their votes and understand issues around why, not just go vote. These are the things that are on the ballot. These are how they're going to affect you. So we do, because we're
Right.
C3, we talk about the issues and not endorsing the person who's
Right.
claiming that they support those issues. We have to make
Exactly.
decision, right? And so to ensure that the Southeast region economically, socially, politically can lean into the promise of not receiving the 40 acres and a mule.
Right.
Getting to scale has been challenging because when you start to look at the monies that are given to women-led organizations that don't look like me, and women and girls that they support that don't look like me,
Come on.
they get a lot more resources to do the work where we
Right.
don't. So no matter what sector you find yourself in, public, private, philanthropic, faith-based, and citizen sector, that elusive access to resource is always hard to continue to obtain, but because we've come this way by faith,
Yeah.
leaning in, I will
Yes.
not give up.
Right.
I will not give in. I've
Good.
been very fortunate that we've had some great opportunities for relationship forming. Because at the end of the day, you do business with who you know,
Come
and
on.
you give money to those you could trust that's gonna do what they claim that they're gonna do
That's
with it.
right. That's right.
Right, so that teeters on that, who's in your spheres of influence, and what is your sphere of influence? Are you influencing other people's lives for the better? And the people that you're in community with, are they doing it as well? So, for me, I lean into, co-creation, spirituality, and justice. I mean, they just are like 3-chord strand. I mean, I
Yeah.
can't function without co-creation. I truly can't do it without doing it from a particular lens of justice, and the spirituality is just what keeps me going.
There it is. There it is. And I think there's something wonderful about the way you described it because, I was just preaching yesterday talking about joy as a fuel. And I think that I've been in a lot of spaces with activists who are trying to make the world a better place, or even more so trying to fight the evils of the world, but trying to do so atheistically. Like they're doing it in their own strength. And I'm like, this will crush you in your own strength. So I really just want to hear you speak a bit more about the importance of a spiritual practice and really spending time with God in your work, because the things that are benefiting from the brokenness of our world are not trying to go gently into that night. So I would love to hear you talk about your spiritual practice.
Well, because I had stated earlier that my father shared with us that we are the ecosystem, I find my peace in nature. I
Yeah.
just do. And not only do I find it in nature, understanding that a tree was not designed for lynching and that it could be a source of shade and solace.
Yes.
I sit under a tree and
Yes.
I'm spending my time letting the Holy Spirit speak to me through the rustling of the leaves when the wind blows.
Right.
That's where I get peace and joy and instruction
Huh?
to continue to go and do the work that my soul must have, if I'm gonna quote Reverend Dr.
Yes.
David J.
Yes.
Buchanan.
Every time.
Did I have to be outside, and that for me grounds me. I love to be barefoot outside. You can't go everywhere barefoot outside these
Real
days.
too. Real too.
But, the grounding of that, it just makes me feel like I am being pulled to the center of the universe to get in charge, to go back out like a piece of blade of grass. Sometimes, you get a little brown, especially if you're on a fairway playing golf in the winter, but we won't go there. But I couldn't have survived my entire life without having the spiritual groundedness and the foundation that was laid for me by my family. When I became an entrepreneur, I was only 27,
My
and,
goodness.
my dad was an entrepreneur too. Not only was he an entrepreneur, he was the first Black policeman in my hometown, and he owned a trucking company.
Okay.
But the same bank that he protected wouldn't give him a loan to start his company.
And that's something.
He had to go over to Shipshewana to the Amish folks.
Really?
Yeah. Mr. Horace Yoder, I'll never forget his name to the day I sit on the other side of glory, right, of heaven. And he only hired black men so they could take care of their families. So when those 5 red dump trucks come rolling through our neighborhood, they all had a black man in the cab. People were literally standing out on the street applauding him because,
Yeah.
he was able to live out his dream of economic and community development and to be able to help other black men take care of their families as well.
That's extraordinary. That is extraordinary. My goodness. I just have to sit with that for a minute because we really don't get through this without community.
Yep.
We really, really don't. Of
Mm-mm. I mean, even I sit here today, but there are an amazing group of 6 other women that support the work that I do here with the
course.
Eco-Womanism Institute Southeast. Please do know you might see me, as I would tell corporate America when I would go in the door. You see one, but I represent many.
For sure.
And so you see me today, but there's some brilliant, bright, bold, creative, diligent, amazing sisters who stand with me shoulder to shoulder doing this work.
No doubt about it. No doubt about it. So talk to me a bit about when you are in those spaces where, they're not necessarily doing the grounding practices that you're doing, or spending that time with nature, and they feel sort of disconnected from the environment, much less this whole sense of like an activist perspective on the environment. How are you engaging with those communities? Like what sort of work are you doing with them, and what's that sort of initial contact like?
Well, you're gonna meet all kind of people along the way. You have to choose this day who you go serve, right?
Hello.
So, I could go into the corporate sector. I'm giving out more Bibles with folks' names inscribed on them. I'm like, look, this is the best I can do for you. You might start with your four gospels because
That's
you're a
right.
little confused over here. Plantation and you are labor, not
Yeah.
free, but almost, right?
Come
And so
on.
here are some tools that you might want to, use. This is the tool for me. And one of the sisters I remember, I'm not going to name the corporation, her husband, and rightfully so, had, an issue with the church. It was a brother.
Sure.
And, we all have church hurts.
Absolutely.
Let's be clear about that. But she too kind of took that on because her parents had died and she was young when it happened.
Right.
So, you got this, well, where is God in all this?
Of course.
Why do good people have to go through bad things and
Of
where was God?
course.
And so, she was sharing with me some of her concerns. And, I'm still going to stand, as you all say, 10 toes down on my faith.
There it is.
Not, I can understand and be empathetic, but at the same time, it's like, let me tell you about a man I know named Jed.
Yeah.
Let me tell you about this brother who can walk on water,
Come on.
who can calm your fears,
Yes.
who can light your path when you think it's dark.
Right.
So we started having those conversations. Fast forward, now she's teaching Bible study.
Lovely. Lovely.
Right? And so then I could say on the flip side, gave another sister a Bible, and a parent said to her, she ought to be giving you some money instead of a Bible. But
Yeah.
knowing that that household wasn't rooted and grounded in faith. If you go back to the other two that I just mentioned, they had a foundation. It was just the hurt that came
Right.
along,
Of
kind of
course.
just a separation, but it was, you can't go too far as much as people think that they have. I'm not squeamish about bringing my faith to wherever I am. I was at Lowe's the other day and it was a sister standing in front of me. And before we got done, she was going home to read her Bible. And I told her about a book. I
Yes.
said, there's a book by Sister Jelks, Townsend Jelks, if it wasn't for the women. You might want to read that one because she made
Come
a
on.
comment about, child, it's so much that we have to do. I said, but there's so much we've done that we can celebrate.
Come on.
We have a tendency to always want to, and I
Yes.
I raise my hand too, because 'cause we're thinking about the next thing or what's
For
on
sure.
our mind, but we don't get an opportunity to pause and go, "You know what? Cheers, and let me stand for the encore. Sister, you done a good job." We
Right.
need to do that with brothers and sisters both. So I'm not just gonna
Absolutely.
narrow it down to sisters, but we don't get a chance to celebrate our successes because we've got so many trials that we're going through to get
Right.
to. So it's kind of like that yin and yang. It's like,
Yeah.
wow, that was great, but we got to get back into
We're
the fight.
still.
Right. We still got to bob and weave. It's
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
it was like a 1-2 punch and they out. It's like, no, shoot, that's getting back up again.
Right. Right, right, right. Yeah, because as you're saying it, it makes me think about what we joked about initially, was that with that sort of dynamic that we've had for centuries now, how are you supposed to be resting? How are you supposed to get any kind of rest or any kind of, true break where you can restore and replenish yourself if you're always just like, okay, I just got this off the checklist, but I'm adding another thing immediately. Like the checklist never ends. We're exhausted that way, forever.
Exactly. And one of my professors at Union at Union said, I need to have a conversation with you offline. I'm like,
Yeah, yeah.
okay. So we get offline and she said, put your sword down. I said, "Excuse me?" And then
Yeah, yeah,
she
right.
said, and Katie, I said, "Oh my, you're referencing me and Dr. Cannon?" And then at the same time, she said, "That's nothing to be proud of," because
Hmm.
she wore herself out too.
My goodness. My
And
goodness.
so you do have to find the rest in the resistance of the fight, right?
Yes.
So I will say I'm playing pickleball now on top of my golfing and my
Let's
walk.
go. Let's
So
go.
it's like find those spaces and places that can give you rest as you're continue to fight a good fight of faith. I mean,
For
it
sure.
does not end with, okay, we're able to get this amendment passed, but there's so many other bills that we need to be addressing too, right? So, yes, that was a great thing. We got Amendment 2 passed,
Right.
but we still got work to do. That was
Yeah.
just one little
One
splinter in this
part of
big old tree we tried to bring down.
come on.
Mhm,
Come on.
mhm.
And it's fascinating because I see so much of what you're saying also feels generational because I see people who haven't been doing the work for that long, kind of opting out early and leaving elders. Like I was having a conversation with a sister at my church who was like, "Oh, and the sister's always volunteering every event we have." And she was like, "Oh, look, I'm 82 this year," and I was like, "82?" Like while I'm celebrating that, I'm also just like, "Who are you handing the baton to?" Because you're energetic and great, but I was like, we can't count on you to do this forever. Who are
So
you
let's
handing this
talk
off
about
to?
succession planning.
Success, which we are terrible at.
Oh, beyond terrible. But again, go back to what we said before. The
Right.
institutions that we were building
Yes.
did not stay intact for succession planning to take place.
That's true too. That's true too.
So you can't blame us that we don't. We get shamed and blamed for so many things,
Real talk.
but we don't read books like The Color of Law. It
Come
was
on.
The Color of Law
Right.
created a red line.
That's right.
Right? It was the color of law that created
Yeah.
conservation easements in perpetuity where you
Come
can't buy
on.
land because they done blocked you out because of the
Yes.
conservation easements, right?
Yes.
I'm gonna I know you and I are gonna constantly go into, yeah, but
Uh-huh.
if not for, we would have succession planning. If you're
Totally.
in a generational wealth pattern,
Yes.
where you're leaving inheritance for your children's children, then
Right?
you put in place the succession for the inheritance to continue to stay intact.
That's right. That's right.
But if you take the inheritance mechanisms and away,
Yeah.
which is ownership,
Right?
diverse asset classes,
Come on.
education, access to capital,
Right?
okay? Because money can make money, but
1000%.
no money can't make no money. I
Can't make no
mean,
money.
zero, zero, right?
That's right. That's right.
So if you have the opportunity, and oh my God, when I was in Mississippi last week at the Alliance, and to hear sisters talking about my family's land, we've had it for 100 plus years. I mean, I applaud them
Of
because my
course.
dad had to sue his family for selling his grandparents' land and the mineral rights
Oh,
and the mineral rights. So when
hey.
you have so many families that have lost land or land was stolen, I mean, the pain of the children of the Great Migration who grew up on that land, who knew that was their safety, they could swim there, love there, eat there, play there, be safe there. And when that was taken, or they were uprooted and had to go someplace else, it's like taking a plant and just pulling it up out of a potted plant and say, I'm gonna
Right.
hold on this till we get there. But those roots didn't have any more nutrients, no more water, no more sun. And then you're gonna stick it in some dirt someplace else. And it's like, are you serious?
Right.
You just pull me up from everything that I know.
Come on.
But you still want me to be the best version of myself. So let's just go back again to, the enslavement strategy.
Right?
You stole something that didn't belong to you,
Come on.
and then you put it in a different position or a place of brutality,
Right.
and you want to know why it's not being successful.
That's it.
Are you serious? So, and let's just, since we talk about the church, I'm gonna go there.
Please go there.
And a colonizer used the church as a weapon.
Very much so.
And in doing so, over time, when people say, well, I don't believe in the church, you should believe in the church, but you should believe that there's a creator that is the creator of the universe, including you.
Right.
Believe that, but not the building.
No. Right.
Because the church and all churches right now are trying to figure out how to keep their lights on.
Come on. It's real. It's very real.
Really? And especially ours, because we inherit the building that was left behind and it has holes in the roof and a lot of other issues,
Yeah.
infrastructure issues, right?
Right.
So you can't always point the finger at Black, brown people and indigenous people when you're not looking at the fact that you are the recipients of the colonizer strategy to remove, extract,
Come on.
disregard, devalue
Right.
another human life.
That's it.
Under the eyes of God said, no, he didn't.
Lying on God.
All day, every day, because that's what a liar and a cheating is still somebody who still does. They
That's
lie
right.
on everybody.
Lie on everybody.
So you all created this Sunday segregated world that you teaching and preaching white nationalists.
That's it.
You're not teaching what thus truly said the Lord.
No.
And you perverted the word to suit your perverted way of not being in communion with other people that don't look like you.
On. And then now I have the audacity to be like surprised when things aren't going right. I'm like, this is what you've been feeding for 250 years. You've been feeding this thing
Right.
400 plus years. Like, what are we talking about?
And I'm just gonna tell you, I didn't even know all the folks was in the street because I was sitting back at a French cafe having myself some tea and some wonderful almond croissant and quiche.
As you
And
should.
my
And a
girlfriend,
quiche.
you see what's going on in Chicago? I'm like, no. And then she gonna send me the picture. I said, well, it's about time they get out there, but it's too bad you got out there for what you want.
Come on.
Me.
Ain't that
Because
something?
you didn't get out there in the street back in November when we had
Right.
a quick 107-day pivot.
Come on.
You all jumped
That
on the
was the time.
bandwagon with white supremacy
Right.
and the con man.
Right.
And now you want to get out in the street. I'm like, take it to the street if you want to, because if we go out there, martial law coming.
You already know. Like, stay home.
Stay home. And they need to be out there. Because
Mhm.
quite frankly, you don't until you feel it. You know that it doesn't happen in our neighborhood. I guess it's happening in their neighborhood.
Come on. That's really it. That's really my grandmother would say in a beautiful Jamaican dialect, if you don't hear, you must feel. You know, so if you don't listen to it, you're gonna feel it. So here we are.
I've only been to Jamaica 18 times, so I can
Oh,
concur with your mother.
let's go. Only 18 times. Quite the flex. Here for it. Here for it. Absolutely. So when you think about the work that we have right now,
Mhm.
where do you see Eco-Womanist Institute's trajectory? Like, what's the future for the work, both as a movement in general, but the specific work of Eco-Womanist Institute Southeast?
We have 3 pillars that we really lean into for our work: leadership, self-recovery, and advocacy. And so under that leadership pillar, there are brilliant women that are leading and brothers as well, but there are others that just need to be able to sit and see other leaders who look like themselves.
Yeah.
And so we have our Emerging Leaders and Mentoring Program, which allows them to, as Dave said, this is the first time I've been in a leadership training that or a leadership scenario
Right.
where everybody looks like me.
Come on.
And the leadership was developed that was culturally relevant.
Right.
We
Right.
weren't trying to put them in whiteface,
No.
kept them in brilliant brown face,
Yeah.
black face that
Yes.
can bring their best self to the table, and they
Yes.
loved it. So, and fellowships and internships live under there.
Mhm.
And then under our self-recovery, we've got Healing Justice and Dr. Catherine Meeks with racial healing. We've got Dr. Paula Parker
Yes.
with Roots Matters.
Yes.
We've got Carmen Foster, which, that's our
For sure.
girl.
For sure.
Carmen leans into both the leadership, actually all the pillars, leadership, the advocacy, and definitely self-recovery, right? And
Wonderful.
so last but not least is that activism piece. We're literally looking at participatory democracy, community and economic development through land access, farming, housing, maintaining our biodiversity and creativity through an artist colony. I
That
mean, if
part.
you see a silhouette with a brother with a beret on and a you don't have to guess, that's the Black Panther, right?
That's
And
right.
so we need to maintain our biodiversity around our colors and our sounds and our cadence
Yeah.
and the way that we use art, which is such a powerful humanitarian tool to
Right.
maintain who we are as humans, right? And
Yeah.
through creativity. So, under that particular pillar, we've got a farm, which is a Black restorative agriculture incubation and development program for
Yes.
Black women
Yes.
farmers.
Yes.
The 1800s, Black women were actually owning land, and what people don't realize that they had slaves slash their husband, and
Come
they
on.
had people in community buying freedom and creating community. We've always been landowners, and my entire scope of my work when I was getting my master's of arts and public theology, it was land, power, and justice. And
Yes.
looking through the Old Testament, and this is a book according to Valerie, when the five sisters went to Zerubbabel and said, "Look, Boo Boo, Pookie, and Roddy, those kings and redeemers y'all like to talk about all the time, they are not getting our father's land."
Come
And
on.
so remember, Moses said, "You know what? We're going to flip the script. You are absolutely right. You girls can keep your land." Then fast forward to 1934, 32, 34, around in there, the legal precedent for women to own land came from that scripture and from
Come
that book
on.
and Moses's
Yeah.
transaction.
With the daughters of Zelophehad. All right.
And you already know that's the Rubadebba.
Yeah, I like your interpretation.
I'm speaking in tongue right now, right?
That's right. You caught the spirit.
I caught it. Exactly. And so that really is what keeps me rooted and grounded into land stewardship, land ownership,
Yeah,
because that's an asset that always increases in value. And that's why they
for
took it.
sure.
We have lost as people. 98% of the land that we had is gone.
My goodness. My goodness.
And that remaining 2% is always under threat. Black land ownership, 10,000 acres a year annually, is gone.
1,000 acres a year. That is astounding. You say that, and I remember one morning when I was living in Bed-Stuy, I step out of my brownstone to see my neighbor down the street, this wise sister, an elder, furiously making her way down the block, just taking all these flyers off of everybody's door. And I was like, what is this? And she got to our door, and it was a flyer trying to get from some company trying to get everyone to sell their brownstone for like $50,000. The brownstones now go for 5 million up, and just thinking about, to your point, the great theft of wealth that has happened. 10,000 acres a year. That's heartbreaking.
And when you start to look at that number, people immediately go, "Oh, wow, that's a lot of land," but they look at it as green space.
Right.
They forget that houses sit on land.
Come on. Right.
Buildings that you own as a business sits on land. So you
That's
have to
right.
start doing the math around not just farmland only. It's land that is owned by someone who's either dwelling, it's a
Right.
commercial spot,
Right.
or it's raw land. So you got to look at all these different asset classes and not just think land is dirt and grass and
Right.
trees.
Right. That's a really good point. That's an excellent point for
And so
sure.
she was doing exactly what our parents would do, block and tackle
Yes. Yes.
and educate. It's like, that's not a good deal for you.
No.
Don't think this temporary short-term change,
Yes.
you just took away your equity and your generational wealth. Again,
Come
going
on.
back to what you said before.
Right.
So but that developer or whoever was trying to buy up all those assets, the devaluation of us, the miseducation of the Negro regarding how you want to hold on to an asset,
Right.
right? And so even when you look at the energy burden that we carry, we, just like our global South brothers and sisters,
That's right.
we use the least amount of energy, but we get charged the most.
That's it.
I mean, if you look at the pyramid, we're at the bottom holding up again that 1% with their energy efficiency appliances. Well, you know
Right.
what? I would like to have that energy efficiency appliance if I didn't have windows that need to be replaced
That's right.
for people. And these are the things that the conversations I'm having with folks in South Georgia and in Georgia, period,
No doubt.
because the housing stock is poor. So you don't qualify for these weatherization programs
Right.
and all this upgrades in your heating and air system.
That's
It's
right.
like,
Solar
look, we
panels and
just
all that.
keep talking, right? And so when we're talking about clean energy, renewable energy, again, it ain't about black people. And even I sit on a particular advisory council specifically geared towards the rural sector.
Yeah.
And, me and a couple of my brown and black brothers and sisters, we have to go, rural is defined differently for y'all than it is for us.
And that's something.
And the way we talk about the rural space is through the Fannie Lou Hamer,
Come on.
Ella Baker,
Come on.
Freedom Riders.
Yes.
And it wasn't that safe for us to raise up our hands and head and say, time out.
Come on.
Where you, again, with your conservation easements,
Mm-hmm.
the redlining, the
That's
law,
right. That's
you
right.
know, you can lynch me because I looked at you.
Madness. True madness.
Mhm, mhm, yeah.
So how can we and everyone who's listening to this, watching this, support your work and get involved in environmental justice efforts? Like, what can we do?
Well, first start where you live, work, play, learn, and worship, and get your head up out of the sand and stop thinking again. Like I said, it's about bunnies and bleeds. It's
Yeah.
about where do you live? How equitable is access to food, transportation, affordable housing,
Right.
healthcare? The folks that are doing that work in your communities, partner with them. I'm not going to tell you to partner with me first. I want you to partner where you live
Yes.
and where your funds are going, your retail leakage is going to the suburbs.
Come on. Right.
Start right where you are. That's your house.
Yes.
How much is that utility bill that you're paying?
Right.
Right? Talk to your neighbors about, hey, look, we got this tree outside that we can't walk on the sidewalk because it's all busted up
Right.
because this tree is trying to find a water source,
Right.
which is probably a leak that the zoning department
Come on.
and public works
Come on.
won't come over here and fix.
Right.
So those are those simple things. If your grandmother and your sister and nieces can't play and walk, and y'all can't walk up and down, your grandparents can't walk down the sidewalk because
Yeah.
it's all broken and busted up,
Right. Right.
call the zoning department, call public works,
Uh-huh.
right? If you all have not had a grocery store until the gentrifiers came,
Come on.
have a conversation about that.
Yeah. For
I
real.
live somewhere in Atlanta now. I'm not going to tell you my zip code.
Got you.
But it's the first time I've lived in a zip code where my insurance is higher, where my property taxes have gone up. I won't even tell you the percentage because if I tell you, you'd be like, "What?"
Right.
Because now there are $500,000 townhomes being built in front of my condo building, where before y'all didn't want to come over here,
Right. Yeah.
right? And so
Yeah.
now that you all are here, we got the grocery store, we got a movie theater, we got. But the legacy
Come on.
community has suffered because of your once and again coming in. You invest in you, but you disinvest in us.
Ain't that something?
So
Ain't that
if I
something?
can say anything to the people that will listen to you and I today, where you live, where you work, where you learn, where you play, where you worship, is everybody getting access to the equitable entrance that they need? Is it
Yeah.
just?
Come on.
Are you living out your moral arc? Is justice rolling down like a river in your neighborhood?
Yeah.
So
For
that
real.
would be my suggestion. Everybody who's listening to us, they know the communities that are being underserved.
For sure.
They know the churches that used to be viable until everybody ran to the suburbs.
Right.
And then when these new young folks came in, they looking at that old dilapidated building. It's like, no, 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 no. Don't get it twisted. And then they see our communities. Why is there trash there? Because the trash man decided he was going to go to your neighborhood first and got over here late or didn't get here, now piled up.
Come on.
So it's like we have to start having some honest conversations about how do we live in community
Yeah.
that is allowing everybody to thrive and prosper. So if you
On.
want to reach out to EWIEYS.org, EWISE.org, or send me an email. And once you reach out there to info, or reach out to my admin at EWIadmin at Eco-Womanist.org, and let's talk about it. And I can tell you how you can help where you live and work, play, and worship, or you can come over here and help us do the work that we're trying to do. And right now, my goal is to acquire a couple hundred acres of land
Yes.
and to be able to build out spaces and places that work for us and be a part of the food system and get us back to growing again. I want to walk around barefoot and know that I'm not stepping in anything. If I do step in something and it's manure, I know how I got there.
Right. It ain't gonna surprise you, right? Valerie, this has been an honor and a joy. Thank you so much.
Anytime I can spend time with you and your lovely wife, I am always front row. And thank you for allowing me to have a front row seat to watch both of you in
Appreciate
your
you.
callings and
Thank you.
the joy that you bring in doing it. We don't get weary in well doing.
That's it. That's it. That's a good word. That's a good word. And friends, please be sure, if you haven't already, to subscribe to our Substack. Also, we're on YouTube at Baddest Chaplain, Spotify, Apple, and anywhere you get podcasts at Baddest Chaplain, you'll find us. But until next time, be blessed and do take care of yourself and others, okay? Talk to you all soon. Peace.